Hey guys, welcome back to the 13th hour. I suggest you get yourself some snacks, you get yourself comfy, because it's time we get a little spooky. So today we're going to be talking about fairies. Not the nice sweet fairies that you think of. We're going to be talking about evil fairies. The word fairy doesn't only belong to these little winged humans that you would think of stereotypically when you would say the word fairy. Fairy is in reference to a fairy tale, so it goes across a whole bunch of different types of creatures. These can be goblins, elves, a whole bunch of different things. Now, Disney will have you believing that fairies are creatures of kindness and goodwill. That's not entirely true. Fairies are evil, child-snatching, mischievous little fays that will do anything to cause trouble to humans. There's a famous saying that goes, "My mother said I never should play with the fairies in the wood." So let's find out why. According to Celtic folklore, fairies are split into two groups. These two groups make up something called the Fairy Court. We have the Unseelie Court, which is the Blessed Court, and these are the fairies known for their kindness and helpfulness towards humanity. And then on the other hand, we have the Unseelie Court. This hosts the most malevolent, evil fairies you could think of. They want to cause nothing but harm to you. And the kinds of fairies you would find on this court are redcaps. These murderous goblins are said to terrorize the borderland between England and Scotland. The reason they're called redcaps is because their skull caps are red. It's pretty much that simple. However, the reason they're red is the gruesome part. Their caps are constantly soaked in blood, and if ever that blood was to dry out on their skull caps, they would die. Now, the reason they terrorised the borderlands between England and Scotland is because way back in the day, this portion of land in the United Kingdom was always fought over. The English wanted it, the Scottish wanted it, and it constantly resulted in consistent bloodshed. So these redcaps found it a perfect way to just constantly keep their little skull caps soaked in blood without really having to do anything. Eventually, the fighting over that portion of land did begin to stop, and it wasn't as easy now for these little goblins to come across free blood. The redcaps now had no easy way to continue surviving, so they started killing anything and everything they could find, from animals to humans, to ensure their survival. If you bleed, they're coming for you. Then we have changelings. Changelings are fairy babies and children that have been left in place of human babies and children after fairies kidnap them. There's a few different reasons why a fairy would kidnap a human child. One of the reasons is fairies enjoyed kidnapping children so they could raise them to be servants to those fairies. They would also snatch children away in the middle of the night and present them as gifts to the devil. And sometimes it could be the fairies just don't like you, or you've done something to really annoy them and they want revenge. You could have broken a fairy circle. If you do something as simple as that, they could come in the middle of the night and steal your children. You're probably thinking, how does a mother not recognize her own baby? Well, that's because changelings have the ability to shapeshift. They would morph into an exact copy of the child, lay in their cot, lay in their bed, and would completely avoid detection from the mum. Although their abilities weren't always working at 100%, sometimes they would slip up, and sometimes they would appear as sickly, or they wouldn't grow in size like a normal child would. They would even grow beards as babies or develop really, really long teeth. Now, for mothers who were a little unsure whether their baby had become a changeling or not, there were a few things you could do to help the changeling show himself. One of the ways was to brew beer in an eggshell. This was supposed to cause confusion to the changeling to the point that it would forget it was supposed to be shape-shifting and it would be forced into identifying itself. The mother could also try and heat up the changeling. So you would find that a lot of mothers might try and put their baby in the oven. Or a more traditional route, they would beat the changeling into submission. There would have been mothers that would have tried to cook their babies just because they were a little bit ugly. Next on the list we have Bogarts. Now I'm sure you probably have heard of Bogarts from Harry Potter before, and they are pretty much the same thing. So they are ghost-like fairies that have the ability to shapeshift, and they would normally shapeshift into something that you're most afraid of. These Bogarts are normally divided into a house Bogart and a wild Bogart. And a house Bogart will take joy in poltergeist-like activity. So you won't always see them, but they'll move stuff around, make noises in the middle of the night, and their main purpose was to just try and scare who was living within the house. These Bogarts were relentless, so you would either have to forcibly remove them if you managed to get hold of one. If not, you would just have to leave your house. That's the only two options if you have a house Bogart. And a wild Bogart is basically the same thing, only lives outside. So these Bogarts will terrorize travelers, anyone who passes through the side of the road or through the woods. They would play tricks on the people just for fun. Again, wild Bogarts have the ability to shapeshift. Rather than being unseen, they enjoyed to be seen, and they would morph into these crazy animals, bears and wolves, anything that was really intimidating just to scare these travelers. They also have the ability to remove their heads, and one of the games they enjoyed most was to throw their heads at travelers and passerbyers just to watch them run and scream in terror. Bogarts are also known as bogies. And other creatures related to that class of fairy would be things such as the redcaps, goblins, and these Bogarts. One of the last fairies we're going to look at is the kelpie. Now the kelpie is a water horse fairy and it inhabits the lochs of Scotland. Now, it's said that the kelpie does look like a horse or a stallion. However, if it wants to, it can take the form of a human. Now, the kelpie loves to drown people, specifically children. And I bet you cannot guess what the kelpie's favourite food is.
Crisps.
Nope.
Spaghetti.
No.
Onion.
Nope. It's the human liver. Kelpies have the amazing ability to not only live underwater, but if they want to, they can also come and live on land. But a majority of the time they will be in the water because it's the easiest place to hide. When they are on land, they do tend to stay in the form of a horse. Reason being is they will try and lure children into coming over and petting them. When the kids come over and try and touch the horse, once their hand touches the kelpie's skin, it becomes insanely sticky. The kid then can't escape. They're stuck onto the kelpie, and the kelpie will drag them back to the loch, take them under the water and drown them. They then eat what they want from the kid, probably their liver, and then they spit out the rest of the body onto the shore of the lake. These are not nice creatures at all by any means. If you happen to see a wild horse just roaming around on its own by one of the lochs in Scotland, do not touch it. Those are just a few types of evil fairies. There are so many more. But what are some ways that you can protect yourself? One of the most common ways is to use iron or steel. And that piece of metal can be in any form. It could be a bit of jewelry, a knife, a screw, it could be anything. And most people would say that if you went to bed with an iron nail in your pocket, it would help prevent you from being taken in the middle of the night. Men would put screws, iron screws, at the base and the headboard of their wives' beds to prevent the women from being stolen by evil elves. One of the most popular forms of protecting yourself from evil fairies is bread. And the reason people use bread is because it's associated with homeliness and a peace offering. So if you had an issue with somebody in the past, you would break the bread with them. And the evil fairies really didn't like that symbolism, so they would just stay away. But there are some fairies that do like bread, and these types of fairies, they wouldn't stay away. So instead, you would use the bread as a peace offering to those fairies. Like I said before, if you happen to break a fairy circle, it can really piss off the fairies, and they'll go out of their way to cause trouble for you. But what you can do to prevent that is On your doorstep or windowsill, or even out in the garden by the fairy circle, you can leave some bread, cream and butter, and that's a great way to say I'm sorry to those fairies. And to be honest, most of the time it does normally work. And there we have it. Not all fairies are sunshine and sprinkles. Some of them really want to hurt you. And all I have to say is be safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one.